Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved Ranga. We are on page 348, and it's the second paragraph. The chapter is Brahman, Purusha, Ishvara.
347 actually.
347, yes, sorry. If we look from this viewpoint of a larger, more plastic reason.
This chapter is one of the biggest chapters in the book, Life Divine. And basically, I'll just give you an overall picture of what he's saying so that we have a clarity. Then he discusses in great detail. Existence from the highest level to the lowest, the highest being spirit and the lowest being matter or even the inconscient. There is a gradation of consciousness, there is a gradation of power, there is a gradation of substance. It's like different areas. It's not like a staircase, but it's more like a ramp. So it depends on you, what you are experiencing and where you want to make a difference. So it's like different countries having different laws. So when you are at one level, you will see the physical world as real, like we do. We think the physical world is real. You go to another level of consciousness, you start seeing things differently. The laws are different and the ways of looking at things is different, just as in the different countries here. So when you go to the higher mind level, you see the physical world as unreal. Then you go even higher up, again it changes. So at each level, your view of things changes. To a certain extent, even Einstein's theory is the same, the theory of relativity. Depending on your frame of reference in which you have placed yourself, you will see the physical world or whatever you want to see in a different way. Okay? It's like, again to give very concrete examples, so it's like water, ice and water vapor. Someone who has never seen water, ice and water vapor, if you tell them that they are the same thing, they will not believe. But that is the truth. It takes different forms. Similarly, when you are a 7-pound baby, you have just been born, you take a photograph. When you are an adolescent, you take another photograph. When you are an adult, you take another photograph. When you are an old man bent over your staff, you take another photograph. They are all the same. And yet they are different. So, the same thing can be different in different levels. So, there is nothing surprising if you see the opposite of what you are seeing at one level. So, Brahman, Purusha, Ishvara, Maya, Prakriti, Shakti. Brahman is a consciousness which you see when you make your mind silent, or even without making it silent, you have the good luck or the good fortune or the good grace of the divine to go to the higher mind level, and there you see the physical world as unreal. You need not see the physical world as unreal. You can see it also as absolutely real. You have a cosmic consciousness. That depends on your nature. You may experience it as real, you may experience it as unreal. Most of the time, when the mind is quietened, you see it as unreal. So, he discusses this unreality in another chapter. Reality and the illusion. That's another matter altogether. But here he is discussing the different experiences man experiences when he goes to different levels. So, the Brahman consciousness is that which is experienced at the higher mind level or even slightly higher in the spiritual planes of consciousness. Let's divide this entire existence from top to bottom in 3. You can divide any way you want because I told you it's a ramp. So, in the physical world, level 1, for clear understanding. Spiritual worlds, level 2. But above the spiritual planes of consciousness, there is a supermind which is beyond even the spiritual planes of consciousness. So, level 3, if you want. So, at level 1, you are seeing the physical world as real. Level 2, you are likely to see the physical world as unreal, but you yourself are in a consciousness which you are call the Brahman consciousness. And what is this Brahman consciousness? It's a consciousness which is absolutely real. But it is without any movement and without any features. So it is immutable and featureless. There is no time, no space there. You are absolutely static condition. You see the physical world in movement, but you are not part of it. You are outside it. And you also see there are no features. You can't explain it in any way beyond words. So this is the Brahman consciousness. It is essentially impersonal. There is no person there. So those who experience this aspect of the divine, they say there is no God. God is a personal aspect. There is no God. There are many, many philosophies which say that. There is only a state of consciousness which can be that of pure consciousness, a freedom, a vastness, a sense of release. You can even, if you are lucky, you can sense power. You can sense also ananda. You can also have bliss. But these are all the possibilities at this level. You go to the next level, then you see the Purusha aspect. The Purusha aspect is this impersonal consciousness taking on a personal form. You can start seeing that you are a person and this person takes different levels, different forms. You can have the mental Purusha, you can have the vital Purusha, you can even have a physical Purusha. And you can have even higher than that. So this is level 2, Purusha consciousness. You go even higher up, you go to the Ishvara consciousness. The Ishvara consciousness is very clearly defined in Sri Aurobindo's philosophy and the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita. It's a consciousness which is infinite, eternal, featureless, immutable, but it combines all the opposites. It's personal as well as impersonal. It is the one as well as the many. It is the finite as well as the infinite. All the oppositions that you see in the physical world are harmonized completely at the third level of the Ishvara consciousness. In the Gita, they call it Purushottama, Purusha Uttama consciousness. We spoke of 3 levels. So level 1 in the Gita is the Kshara Purusha, the mutable Purusha. Your psychic being is mutable. Don't think it is not mutating. It is mutating. It is sleeping in the beginning and slowly through many lives it wakes up slowly. And the psychic being is the soul that is woken up. It becomes aware of its own existence. It becomes aware of the divine presence in the world. So this is the second level in the Gita, is the Akshara Purusha, the immutable. And then you go to the third level, the Uttama Purusha. Uttama means the highest Purusha. So Kshara Purusha, mutable Purusha or personality, not personality, person. The second one, the immutable person, and the third one is the person who is beyond mutability and immutability. So this is the chapter. I have summarized the whole thing for you. So now he is discussing in detail. Okay? So 40 pages we have summarized and told you what it is all about. Now we read what we have to read today. If we look from this viewpoint of a larger, more plastic reason, taking account of the logic of the infinite, at the difficulties which meet our intelligence when it tries to conceive the absolute and omnipresent reality, we shall see that the whole difficulty is verbal and conceptual and not real. Our intelligence looks at its concept of the absolute and sees that it must be indeterminable, and at the same time it sees a world of determinations which emanates from the absolute and exists in it. For it can emanate from nowhere else and can exist nowhere else. It is further baffled by the affirmation, also hardly disputable on the premises, that all these determinates are nothing else than this very indeterminable absolute. But the contradiction disappears when we understand that the indeterminability is not in its true sense negative, not an imposition of incapacity on the infinite, but positive, a freedom within itself from limitation by its own determinations, and necessarily a freedom from all external determination by anything not itself, since there is no real possibility of such a not self coming into existence. The infinite is illimitably free, free to determine itself infinitely, free from all restraining effect of its own creations. In fact, the infinite does not create, it manifests what is in itself, in its own essence of reality. It is itself that essence of all reality, and all realities are powers of that one reality. The Absolute neither creates nor is created. In the current sense of making or being made, we can speak of creation only in the sense of the being becoming in form and movement what it already is in substance and status. Yet we have to emphasize its indeterminability in that special and positive sense, not as a negation, but as an indispensable condition of its true infinite self-determination. Because without that, the reality would be a fixed, eternal determinate, or else an indeterminate, fixed and bound to a sum of possibilities of determination inherent within it. Its freedom from all limitation, from any binding by its own creation, cannot be itself turned into a limitation, an absolute incapacity, a denial of all freedom of self-determination. It is this that would be a contradiction. It would be an attempt to define and limit by negation the infinite and illimitable. Into the central fact of the two sides of the nature of the Absolute, the essential and the self-creative or dynamic, no real contradiction enters. It is only a pure infinite essence that can formulate itself in infinite ways. One statement is complementary to the other. There is no mutual cancellation, no incompatibility. It is only the dual statement of a single inescapable fact by human reason in human language. Huge paragraph, and he speaks of determinability and indeterminability, so we have to understand exactly what he's saying. And we'll try to do that. So we go back to the beginning of the para. So, by the way, just do this determinability and indeterminability. It's actually very simple. It's not very complicated. Determinate is something which is fixed. It has got something very, very, you can give features and limit it. My computer is a determinate form of matter. Matter itself is indeterminate. It can take any form it wants. But matter can become my computer, it can become my table, it can become, I can describe it, its weight, its size, what it is capable of. So that's a determinate. Okay? The indeterminable is something which is infinite and cannot be given a form. So remember these two things. One good example is, take molten metal. Okay? It's an indeterminate which can produce determinates. It can produce steel ingots, it can produce wires, it can produce railway tracks, it can produce so many things. All these are the determinates. The molten metal itself is the indeterminate. Note interestingly that the molten metal also is a determinate, but it has to take a higher thing. So I'm just giving you examples. Take a huge amount of clay. The pots and pans which are determinations are there inherent in clay, but they are not yet manifested. So if I want to make determinations out of the indeterminate clay, what do? I take a little bit and give it a form. So giving it a form is a determinate, and that which is formless and infinite without features is the indeterminable. Indeterminate. Okay? Now, with this, we go to the Even the word normally as we use it, determinate, I am determined to do this. You have fixed something for yourself. There is a fixation. You are sure you want to do something.
Determination.
You are not vague. Huh?
Determination.
Yes, that's right. A determination is something you have decided to do, a fixed thing. So this is, he is carrying it on to the forms and other things. Psychologically also, it's the same thing. When you are determined to do something, you are excluding all other possibilities and wanting to do only one thing. Okay, so we go to the beginning of the para. If we look from this viewpoint of a larger, more plastic reason, taking account of the logic of the infinite at the difficulties which meet our intelligence when it tries to conceive the absolute and omnipresent reality, we shall see that the whole difficulty is verbal and conceptual and not real. So, again, we have to understand the limitations of language. Okay? Now, there is something, communication and expression can be below the language level, it can be at the language level, it can be above the language level. The animals don't have language, but they communicate with sounds, inarticulate sounds. So that's their language, but it's not our language. So there is, when a dog growls, you know what he wants. He is communicating. When a cat is satisfied, it purrs. So there are sounds which communicate, okay? But they are inarticulate. When you come to language, it is slightly more precise. But in fact, it becomes too precise. When you want to express something which is more flexible, more pliable, more possibility of taking different forms, language becomes inadequate. So you go to the higher level of understanding, you don't need language. I can read your thoughts and I can see what is happening if I am at that level. So you have gone beyond language. So this is the, language is a problem. That's what Srindra is saying. Spiritual experience is not limited to language. It sees the truth. That's what he's saying. So we'll see our intelligence, when it tries to conceive the absolute and omnipresent reality, we shall see that the whole difficulty is verbal and conceptual and not real. I'll spend 2 minutes on this to explain what he means by this.
But what about the word?
That is a conventional expression to express manifestation. When you speak of the word, you mean that it is getting manifested. The indeterminate is manifesting all the possibilities and determinates within itself. And why do they use the word? Because it's very similar to you. Suppose you have a thought in your mind, but you are not speaking it out. It remains unmanifest. Now, if you want to express your thought and let others know what your thought is, you want to manifest your thought, you're going to use words. So that's why the word is used as a convention for manifestation. Right? Okay, so now why is he saying that word is verbal only? Suppose I am faced with something which I cannot describe at all. Something which is totally featureless, something which is absolutely stable, something which is absolutely without any impurity in it. Okay? I'll give you a practical example and from there we will see. Okay? Let's take a glass of water. I like to put it that way. Okay? Let's take a glass of water which is absolutely pure and not moving at all, transparent. Okay? Now we imagine in our imagination that this glass becomes bigger and bigger. The water also is becoming bigger and bigger in it. Let it go as far as it wants. Okay? It becomes infinite. You don't see the glass anymore. What are you seeing? Ask someone to come and ask him, what are you seeing? What will he say? Is he likely to say, I am seeing nothing? He is likely to say that.
Yes.
If he says that, you go to the Buddhistic philosophy. And if he says, no, I see that there is something, there is water, but it is featureless, you come to the Advaita philosophy. So that's what I mean by language. Something which you cannot express. Okay? Because there is no word for something which is empty and full at the same time. That's the whole problem.
I'd like to ask about this phrase, taking account of the logic of the infinite.
Yes, because our logic always goes by opposites.
Yes.
The opposites are never compatible in this world. If they were compatible, there would be total confusion. Black and white cannot be the same. Wet and dry cannot be the same. An intelligent fool does not exist. So that's why there are dualities here, and that's our logic. You have to use logic for clarity of thought and clarity of action. If the opposites are not there, if logic is not there, you will be confused. So logic is very necessary here, but it is limited. What about the logic which says that, no, I can enter into a consciousness in which black and white are really the same thing in different forms? When I can say that a wind which is very intense is a storm, but a gentle breeze which I like is the same. It's wind. So it's possible to go to a level of consciousness where you see the opposites in perfect harmony with each other. So that's the logic of the infinite. You have to be a little more flexible in your thinking. That's what he's saying. The logic of the finite and the logic of the infinite. Right? So this is clear. It's verbal because we don't have a verb, we don't have a word which describes something as featureless but not really empty. It is full, but without features. It's capable of producing everything. The Brahman is exactly that. So when the Buddhists want to explain, they have to use words. And they say, it's a shunyam, it's a zero, it's a nihil. They're not wrong, but they're using words which convey something else to you. Okay? So that's what the problem is. The experience is the same for everybody. So, we shall see that the whole difficulty is verbal and conceptual and not real. Our intelligence looks at its concept of the absolute and sees that it must be indeterminable, and at the same time it sees a world of determinations which emanates from the absolute and exists in it. So, let's say the word absolute is philosophic. So let's say there is a consciousness which is featureless. I don't use the word God. Sri Aurobindo also he doesn't use the word God. He uses the word God plentifully in the synthesis, but not in Life Divine, which is supposed to be philosophy. Okay? So you have to eliminate God and think only in terms of facts and the principles. So our intelligence seeks at the concept of the absolute, and if you have the experience of the physical world and the nirvana, you have a concept of the absolute which is itself featureless and indeterminate. But it has the power to create determinations. As I said, like clay, which is not taking any form, but it can produce all the forms.
So when Sri Aurobindo speaks about the formless breaking into form.
Yes, that's an indeterminate creating determinations. Exactly. Take the principle of wood, okay? It can be anything. But when out of that wood I can produce a table, I can produce a cupboard, I can produce a chair. These are the determinations. So that's what it means. So, our intelligence looks at its concept of the absolute and sees that it must be indeterminable. Why must it be indeterminable? That's another thing we can discuss. Because if it is capable of only producing some things, it must itself be limited. But if it is unlimited, it can produce infinite things. Or rather, we can use the logic in the negative way. Let's see, I am a furniture maker, okay? And I am using either white cedar, which is a wood, or I can use rosewood, which is a wood. But if I use rosewood, I can make a table, I can make a chair, I can make a cupboard. But its color is fixed. I can't make any furniture without the color of rosewood. I am limited. So something which has got limitations, its products also are limited, so it is itself limited. I can't make other things. There is a limitation. If I use white cedar, again the same logic. But suppose I start with a wood which has no color at all. It can produce all these things without, I can go to any color I want. So that's why it has to be indeterminate, necessarily. Okay? So our intelligence looks at the concept of the absolute and sees that it must be indeterminable. And at the same time, it sees a world of determinations which emanates from the absolute and exists in it. Now, all life divine and all Indian philosophy, most of it, is based on the Advaita philosophy. Vedanta is the Advaita philosophy. There is only one ultimate reality which is indeterminable. Everything else that is produced is inside the absolute only. There is nothing outside the absolute. Third or fourth chapter I think, Life Divine, reality omnipresent. So that's the Advaita philosophy. The reality is there everywhere. It is omnipresent, and that's the only thing that exists. We are seeing all these things, but they exist in the absolute. They can't exist outside the absolute because there is nothing else. Only the absolute exists. So even when it is creating forms, it is not creating something out of itself. It is creating things within itself. Or to put it in other words, when it is creating, okay, let's say a factory is creating cars. It is creating out of the factory. It's coming out and being used elsewhere. But if I am creating something which seems to go out, there is no out actually. Therefore, it is better to use the word manifesting what is already in it. That's what he says. The world is nothing but a manifestation of the divine. It's not something produced outside. Okay. So, that's what he's saying. It is producing within itself. Like we are producing thoughts within our own mind. The thoughts are not different from me. Exactly in the same way, whatever the divine is conceiving and producing, it's within himself. Although there seems to be something going outwards. You have to use the logic of the infinite. Okay? For it can emanate from nowhere else and can exist nowhere else. It is further baffled by the affirmation. Now we are coming to another idea. Further baffled by the affirmation, also hardly disputable on the premises that all these determinates are nothing else than this very indeterminable absolute. So, this absolute itself is producing all these things. Just as we gave the example of water vapor taking the form of water and taking the form of ice. So exactly that's what he's saying. All the determinates that you see are only forms of the indeterminable and indeterminate. In other words, everything is God. That's the Advaita philosophy. You are God, this form is God, this table is God, this house is God, everything is God. But we don't use the word God, we have to use the word Satchidananda. That's the Advaita philosophy. So, but the contradiction disappears when we understand that the indeterminability is not in its true sense negative, not an imposition of incapacity on the infinite, but positive, a freedom within itself from limitation by its own determinations, and necessarily a freedom from all external determination by anything not itself, since there is no real possibility of such a not self coming into existence. So, I am reading the sentence, phrase by phrase, we will look at it. But the contradiction disappears. What is the contradiction? In spiritual experience, now I am seeing the physical world as real. I go to the higher mind, the physical world becomes unreal. It's a contradiction. The contradictions exist in the physical world also. Light and darkness. We feel that they are opposites. But they are not opposites in the Advaita philosophy. That's what Swamdeva is saying. So he is explaining why it is necessary to experience the indeterminable. When I see the physical world, I see all the physical forms. Okay? The Absolute has produced them. But is the Absolute bound to produce only these physical forms? Srimad is saying, and the Advaita philosophy says, that no. It is producing these forms, but it can be free of making forms. If it wants, it can desist from making forms. That is the nirvana experience. There is a consciousness which is absolutely static and producing nothing at all. Why do you want to limit the Satchidananda to only making forms? That's the question that comes up. It can be free of making forms. So when you experience the nirvana experience, the Brahman consciousness, it is producing nothing, it is just static. It is to show to you that I am not bound by what I am producing. I can be free. If I want, I need not produce anything. That's the Brahman consciousness.
Or produce something negative.
Yes, so it's not something negative, but it's a freedom from its being bound to produce something.
Yes.
That's what he's explaining. It's a freedom. I am free from what I am producing. It's like a parent who produces a child, but is attached to the child. Okay? The divine can be unattached to what it is producing.
Why then the Buddhists who reach this nirvana or moksha can't see this?
Oh, that's an interesting question. But that's exactly what the thing is. It depends upon my capacity. I can run 100 meters in 15 seconds. And I can run, if I try hard, 14 seconds. But I can't run in 13 seconds. So I am capable of going up to the higher mind level, but I may not be capable of going to the element mind level. Or even if I am capable of, it is so satisfying that I want nothing else. When I am in my body, I am suffering. I have got difficulties. I can't think clearly. But at the same time, when I go up there, I am completely free of pain. I am free of suffering. I am free of any limitation. It is so satisfying, you think of nothing else.
So it is only Sri Aurobindo who has told us you must come back down to earth.
That's right.
And do the work.
Having had liberation, you must come back and help the others. That's his philosophy. Okay, so. But the contradiction disappears when we understand that the indeterminability is not in its true sense negative. It is not negative. It's an imposition. It's not an imposition of incapacity on the infinite, but positive, a freedom within itself from limitation by its own determinations, and necessarily a freedom from all external determination by anything not itself, since there is no real possibility of such a not self coming into existence. What he's saying is that The infinite is capable of production, it is capable of non-production. When we think of God or when we think of the Absolute, we think of it as being omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent. That's our conception of God. He cannot be anything but that. Don't think that this is something that doesn't happen in the physical world. Okay? There are many, many philosophies which say that all the things which we consider wrong and negative and perverse are not the productions of God. They are the productions of the devil. This is there in many, many philosophies. We have the concept of heaven and hell. We have the concept of Jannat and Jahannu in the Islamic concept. Even in Indian, we very generally speak, it's not philosophy, but generally, there is a Swarga and a Narak. But that's a general thing. It's not the Indian philosophy. It's a general feeling. So this concept is there everywhere, that there is a negative thing. So, the infinite, Shabda is saying and Advaita is saying, it is not limited to omniscience, omnipotence and omnipresence. It can become the opposite of all those things also. Why do you want me to limit? If you want to limit those things to only omnipotence and omnipresence and omniscience, then you are limiting God. And your own conception of God being infinite is negated.
Then the only resort we have as humans is silence.
Yeah.
You can't say anything.
Yeah. You can't, but that's exactly the point.
Yes.
That's an indeterminable. The moment you say something, you are limiting him. That's the thing. Okay? So, we have had a detailed discussion so that the ideas become clear. Okay? So, then, that last bit I will just explain a little bit. Since there is no real possibility of not such a thing coming into existence, the Brahman consciousness is not compelled by anything to produce something. It is freely producing, and it is freely not producing if it doesn't want. It is not compelled by anything else. Why? Because there is nothing else except the Absolute. Reality omnipresent. So there can be nothing outside the Absolute. There are philosophies which say that there are, but not the Advaita philosophy. Entire life divine is based on the Advaita philosophy, the Vedantic philosophy. There are variations in the Vedantic philosophy, but they are all agreed that the Absolute and its conceptions are all there. There is the Vedantic philosophy, the Advaita, non-duality, only oneness. Okay? So, the infinite is illimitably free. That's what we have been discussing. Free to determine itself infinitely, free from all restraining effect of its own creations. It can be absolutely free. In fact, the infinite does not create. It manifests what is in itself, in its own essence of reality. So, this is interesting. Again, we have to think of it. It is not creating something new. Something which is possible in itself, it is just manifesting it. This is what is already there in me, I am manifesting it.
Therefore, there's no restraining effect of its own creation.
That's right. Okay? So, free from all restraining effect of its own creating. No. So, what does he mean by that? Free from all restraining effect of its own creations. I am not bound by what I have created. The created is not conditioning me. I am free. I have produced that, it's independent. As I said, if you have a parent there is a child, either you want the child to do what you want him to do, that means there is a connection and you are putting a restraint on him and you are trying to control him. Or you say, you are independent, you do what you want and I am not concerned. So the divine can take that stand also. That's what is being said. I mean, these images they help to a certain extent, but they are not absolutely accurate. You can find arguments to go against the example that I'm giving. Yeah, it's possible. But it makes it somewhat clear, the idea. Okay, so in fact, the infinite does not create. It manifests what is in itself, in its own essence of reality. It is, now, this essence of reality, think of the seed and the tree. Then it becomes clear. The essence of the tree is in the seed. It is only manifesting what is already in it. It's not creating anything. It's the same with a human being. Na? The chromosomes, okay, and the RNA and the DNA summarize the whole human personality. Even the hair, the color of your hair, the color of your skin, the shape of your eyes, the shape of your nose, everything is determined in the chromosomes. It is only manifesting, it's just bringing them out. So that's the essence of reality. It is itself that essence of all reality, and all realities are powers of that one reality. All that is manifested here are powers of the divine. That's what he's saying. They are powers. So, the absolute neither creates nor is created. Now, this is also something very interesting, because this is also mentioned in the Gita. You may feel that it's a very bland statement without any significance, but it's not like that. The absolute neither creates nor is created. The absolute is not creating. It creates through its agents. It creates the universe, and the universe is creating the individuals. As we discussed last time, I think, in another class, in the Gita it says the Prabhu, the divine, neither creates a work nor the creator. It is not doing anything. It is doing it through the nature. It is nature that is making you work. Okay? But he does not come down directly and start doing things. It's like the manager of a big company. He is not at the floor level directing the operations at the floor level. He has got agents to do that. He has got an assistant manager, he's got managers, assistant managers, supervisors. So the manager is not directly directing things in the factory floor. He is not doing that. He is just sitting and giving instructions. That's what is meant by this one. The absolute neither creates nor is created. In the physical world, you have been created by the universe, not the divine. That's also a fact. That also you have to understand. Okay? And the example we gave last time was exactly that. Okay? That man drowning in the sea. There is a man drowning in the sea, and he says that God will come and save me. He's got faith. A ship comes and says, you are drowning, we save you. He says, no, God is going to come and save me. 3 times the ship comes, and every time he says, no, I'll be saved by God. He drowns, he goes to God and says, what happened? You didn't save me? So God said, I sent 3 ships. 3 times I sent ships to save you. So he acts through the ships. He is not acting directly. The conditions he has made in the physical world, he is directing everything through the conditions he has made in the physical world. So this statement, which seems a bland statement, is full of significance. He does not break his own laws. He works through the laws that he has created. Sometimes, in peculiar circumstances, the absolute grace breaks its own laws, but that's very rare. That's the divine grace. It doesn't take into account laws. But usually he works through laws. Okay? So that's what he's meaning here. The absolute neither creates nor is created, in the current sense of making a being or being made. Of making or being made. We can speak of creation only in the sense of the being becoming in form and movement what it already is in substance and status. So this is again the seed and the tree. What is already there in the seed becomes the tree. The Absolute contains the universe, all the possibilities in the universe it is creating because already possible there.
And in the human being?
Is also one of the possibilities.
Yes.
You are a possibility in the physical world and he has created you. Somebody else is another possibility and he has created that. So each one is saying, the divine is telling you, I want you to execute this possibility. Do that. Like Mother gave you the charge of the garden, okay? So you have to look after the garden and you have got the other functions also. So nobody else is doing that. Even if somebody else does it, he is doing it in a different way. So each individual is one possibility of the divine. Okay? So becoming in form and movement what is already what it already is in substance and status. Yet we have to emphasize its indeterminability in that special and positive sense, not as a negation, but as an indispensable condition of its free, infinite self-determination, because without that, the reality would be a fixed, eternal, determinate, or else an indeterminate, fixed and bound to a sum of possibilities of determination inherent within it. So if you don't give this freedom to the divine, he can produce only fixed things. That's what he's saying. But the divine is not limited. It can produce infinitely. Therefore, it has to be itself free of all determinations. Clear? So when you go to the nirvana consciousness, you see the physical world as unreal and you think, my God, what is the reality? I was seeing the physical world as real, now I am seeing it as unreal. So it is only to show you that I am not bound to make the forms in the physical world. I can be absolutely free of that. I can be static. I am just watching. I can do that. I can produce forms. I need not produce forms. That's the freedom from all. So it's a positive thing, not a negative thing. That's what he's saying. Yeah, positive sense, not a negative, but an indispensable condition of its free, infinite self-determination, because without that, the reality would be a fixed, eternal determinate, or else an indeterminate, fixed and bound to a sum of possibilities of determination inherent within it. Its freedom from all limitation, from all binding by its own creation, cannot be itself turned into a limitation, an absolute incapacity, a denial of all freedom of self-determination. So, the divine is not bound to create. He can be also free of all creation. That's the experience of the nirvana consciousness. So, an absolute incapacity, denial of all freedom of determination. It is this that would be a contradiction. It would be an attempt to define and limit by negation the infinite and indeterminate, the infinite and illimitable. If you insist that God is omnipotent, omniscient and omnipresent and he can be only that, you are limiting him. Your concept of him as being infinite is negated. That would be a contradiction. That's what he's saying. Okay, so into the central fact of the two sides of the nature of the Absolute, the essential and the self-creative dynamic, no real contradiction enters. Let's look at this sentence clearly. The essential is a seed. The self-creative or dynamic, the tree, it has been created, self-creative. The seed has created the tree. That which is static, essential, has created the details. Okay? So, that's what he's saying. There is no contradiction between the two. You may think it a contradiction if you live in the logic of the finite. But if you go to the logic of the infinite, it's not a limitation. It's two different aspects of the same thing. The static and the dynamic. There is another way of putting it also. You can think of it as that. Okay. The sea can be absolutely at rest. But the sea can also produce waves. It is capable of both. It is capable of remaining silent. It is also capable of producing waves. The wave can never exist without the sea. But the sea can exist without the waves. The divine can exist without the world. But the world cannot exist without the divine. That's what is being said. One statement is complementary to the other. There is no mutual cancellation, no incompatibility. It's only the dual statement of a single, inescapable fact by human reason in human language. So, he is ending with the language problem and ending again with the language problem. The problem is language and expression and not the reality. That's what he's saying. One statement is complementary to the other. It's not a mutual cancellation, no incompatibility. It's only the dual statement of a single inescapable fact by human reason in human language. Okay, I can give another example to explain that what seem to be opposites are not really opposites. You go to the ashram theatre. The lights are on full blazing, okay, before the program starts. The bell rings and the program is about to start. The lights start dimming. They start dimming. Finally, they are put off. Now, is dark, you are in darkness now, but you are in the light. Are they opposites? Or is the darkness only a form of light? That is what Simba is saying. There is no cancellation. There is no opposition between the two. Darkness is only the opposite of light. It's even true in science. There is no coldness. There is only heat. When heat starts reducing itself and disappears, it becomes cold. Cold doesn't exist by itself. It's the absence of heat. So that's exactly the Advaita philosophy.
Thank you, Ranga. Brilliant evening.
Okay, we stop here today.
I think so. Namaste all. Remember that on Friday we have essays on the Gita, and on Saturday the synthesis of yoga. And all will be on our channel, Mother and Sri Aurobindo. Namaste.